Hi everybody, welcome back to Adventures in Polish Land and happy Friday to you. I did not upload a Friday Reads last week. I honestly wasn't feeling that great. I am totally fine. I was just very tired and decided to take a week off. And then it became a race over this last week to finish my library books before they were due. I had mixed success with that, so let's go ahead and jump right into my reading update. Since the last time we spoke, I finished Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. I really enjoyed this book. It was exactly what I needed because it is genre fiction, commercial horror, I would call it, so it reads very quickly, but it's also historical fiction, and I really loved how the author paired real-life history with his witchy book. So this novel follows a young teenage girl in the 1970s. She is sent to a home for unwed mothers set in Florida. And essentially this is an industry that used to exist before Roe v. Wade was passed, where unwed mothers were sent to these homes to have their babies in private, and then they were forced to give their children up for adoption, which is absolutely horrible. The whole thing is so disturbing, and it really makes me want to learn more about this industry, so I've actually put a nonfiction book that the author mentions at the end on my library want to read list because I do want to revisit this topic. But in the book, then you get a whole witchcraft element as well. And because it's Grady Hendrix, there is some really gruesome stuff in this book, specifically with some body horror. It's not too bad. You can read it pretty quickly and move past the gross stuff if you need to. But I will say one thing I found really interesting is that the scenes depicting childbirth are more horrifying at times than the actual horror elements themselves, which I thought was really interesting. So this was a great read, very entertaining, and despite its length, it's about 470-ish pages, I believe, it read very quickly. Then I was reading Land of Love and Drowning by Tiphanie Yanique. This one is set in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I had, I think, a few days left before it was due at the library when I started it, and it took me a little while to read this one. It was just a dense read, a little bit slower paced, and it also dealt with very challenging topics, so I had to force myself a little bit to keep reading the book. This one I did return to the library 2 days late, which I don't like to do, but I also didn't want to give up on reading it because this book was not from my local library, but from the greater library system. So if I wanted to read it again or check it out again, I would have to wait for another hold to come in and for the book to reship. So I made the decision to keep it 2 days late, which I feel like 2 days is somewhat acceptable for keeping a book late from the library. But all of that being said, this book follows a family. It begins at the time where the U.S. is taking ownership, if you will, of the U.S. Virgin Islands from the Dutch. And you watch the transfer day happen in 1917. And you are following a family from that time period through the mid-1900s. And this book deals with really tough topics. One of the daughters, Iona, is abused by her father from the time she's a young child, and so she has very complicated feelings towards that because she loves her father more than anything, but she also knows their relationship is wrong. Then you have her younger sister, Annette, who develops feelings for her half-brother, and they begin a relationship. However, they don't know that they are siblings because Iona is keeping that a secret. And it's very complicated, very messy. You learn a lot about the U.S. Virgin Islands over the course of the book. I thought the history was very interesting because when America first takes control of the islands, the islanders are initially very excited to be part of America and to be considered Americans, but soon they realize that they are not seen as Americans by people who live on the main continent. So I thought that was fascinating. You learn a lot about the racism that occurs when the U.S. Virgin Islands go to war for the United States, yet they are still segregated and racially profiled, if you will. and soon their islands become taken over by white landowners and turned into a tourist destination. And I actually had really interesting feelings about that because I had never thought about traveling to the U.S. Virgin Islands before. It's just not something that my family ever did when I was growing up, and it's not something that I heard about growing up. But at my current place of work, there are multiple people who St. Thomas is their primary vacation destination, and every single year they go to St. Thomas. And I kept thinking, I don't know if I could ever go there after reading this book. If I did go there, I think I would have to make sure that I'm doing like history studying and going to museums and doing like more cultural visits when I went there, and also making sure that the hotels that I stayed at benefited the locals. I think it's similar to Hawaii, where it is part of our country, but I think unfortunately a lot of the culture has been switched over to our own Western ideal view of it, and a lot of who benefits from the tourism may not be the locals themselves. So very interesting topic of conversation that was raised in this book. I'm glad I read it overall. I gave it a 3.5-star rating. Like I said, very challenging topics within the book, but I read it for the American Lit Reading Challenge, and I'm very happy I did so. So now my library books are back at the library, and I have a book. I think this was from my April TBR. I'm not sure, but it kept getting pushed off, and that is The Call of the Wild by Jack London. And I am just noticing in the camera that my nails match this beautifully, which was not planned. But this is a book that I'm reading for a story set in Alaska. I know that it is set in parts of Canada as well, but Alaska is part of it. And this is a classic children's novel published in 1903, and it is about a dog named Buck who grew up in California, and he was kidnapped by a person who worked at his master's estate, and he was in debt, so he kidnapped Buck and he sold him off to be a sled dog. And now we are following how this domesticated pet is a working dog now and everything that comes along with it. This is a short book, but I'm honestly struggling to read it. I am just not that into it. I'm on page 66 out of 133, so ideally I would finish this tonight on Friday, perhaps tomorrow, and then my plan is to check out I'm Laughing Because I'm Crying Again from my library. They only have it as an ebook, and so I read about 50 pages of it a few weeks ago, and then I'm going to recheck it out, assuming it's still available, and I will read more of it, hopefully finish it over the weekend, if not next week. So that's where I am with all of my reading over the last couple weeks. I finished 2 books. I am currently reading this one. I will recheck out that other library book that I was reading. And if you've been following along my channel with the American Lit Reading Challenge, you may have noticed I did not post a TBR for July. And that's because I was so far behind at the beginning of July that I just wanted to catch up with everything. And so I am very close to that. And I was debating whether or not to pick any July TBR books or if I should just do one pick at a time. And now that I'm sitting here talking with you, I think I'm going to pick 3 new books. We are a little bit more than halfway through July, but if I pick 3 books today from my cup, then I can request them from the library, and by the time they come in, I should be able to pick them up and read them as the rest of the month goes on. And now that I said all of that out loud, I'm actually going to pick 2 books, because if I request them today, they'll be ready within the next few days, and I can pick them up probably over the course of this next week. And then I will have probably about a week left of the month. So let's pick 2 books from my cup. This will round out July, hopefully, and then we'll start again fresh in August and pick 5 new ones in its own TBR video. This is all kind of off the cuff. It's one of those things where while I was talking to you, I decided on this plan willy-nilly. So let's go ahead, pick 2 places. Let's see what I get. 1 and 2. Okay, first up, we have California, and then we have Maine. Okay, so Maine I actually did already. I have the book right here, actually. I read Olive Kittredge. This was not on my TBR, but I bought it while I was traveling and read it. So Maine is already checked off. Let's pick another place from the cup. This is exciting. We're making progress here. And we have, I cannot believe this, Oklahoma. Oklahoma is already checked off as well. I read Out of the Dust. That one I already have a review video up for, so I will link that in the description box if you're interested. Let's try again. We've got one more. And we have North Carolina. I do not think I've read a book from North Carolina yet. Let me place you on a brief pause, and I am going to find books to read for California and North Carolina, and I will be right back. Okay, I am back. That took me a little bit longer than I expected. I had a lot of books pre-planned for California, so I went through all of them, and I decided that right now I am in the mood for The Guncle by Stephen Rowley. This is an LGBT book. I think it's contemporary. I'm not sure if it's romance, but I am an aunt and I love my niece and nephew more than anything. So a book where there is a uncle, I think I would really enjoy it and relate to it. And it says, Patrick, or Gay Uncle Patrick, Gup for short, has always loved his niece Maisie and nephew Grant. That is, he loves spending time with them when they come out to Palm Springs for week-long visits or when he heads home to Connecticut for the holidays. But in terms of caretaking and relating to 2 children, no matter how adorable, Patrick is honestly a bit out of his league. So, sounds right up my alley, and the cover of this book looks really summery, so I think this will be a perfect read for July. I did have a book pre-planned for North Carolina as well, but I decided to not read it right now. I'm still going to leave it on my library want to read list. It's called Broken Faith, and it is a nonfiction book about a religious cult, so definitely something that I'm interested in, but it's over 400 pages and it just seems really dense. And right now I'm kind of in a summery mood where I want to read lighter fiction. So I did a little bit of Googling, and I'm going to be reading The Townsend Family Recipe for Disaster. This is by Shauna Robinson. And it says, it's a heartfelt book club read following one woman's journey to reconnect with her Black family in the South, just as it's on the brink of falling apart. And I always look to see what my Goodreads friends have rated books, and Rincey over at Rincey Reads gave it a 3-star rating, but she said, this is a light, wholesome, quick read, and I think there is a lot here that is interesting, but she wishes it was explored deeper. But that being said, I'm in the mood for a light, quick read, and I think this one will be a good summer book as well. So I've put both of those on hold at my library, and therefore concludes my unexpected July TBR as part of this Friday Reads. I hope you enjoyed being along for the ride. I feel like this was a really good way to get me reinvigorated about my TBR and my reading. I had a bit of a slump and was feeling pretty down about being behind in all of my goals for the year, but I'm hopeful that I can get back on track, get things wrapped up, and I definitely still want to film review videos for every single book that I've read as part of the American Lit Reading Challenge. I have just been pretty busy and not finding a lot of extra time to film, but hopefully I can get some reviews filmed, edited, and uploaded in the coming weeks and months. And I've also been tagged in some videos, so hopefully I will find the time to do those as well. I am not complaining at all, but I don't think it is realized how much time and effort goes into making booktube videos, because not only do you have to sit down, think about what you're going to say and film them, but then you have to edit them and upload them, and that takes a lot of time. So definitely not a complaint. I really enjoy doing it. I just have to make sure that I have the time and I'm setting aside the time to do that. So thanks for being patient with me. I know the last few months I've rarely uploaded, but I'm still here, still reading, and still excited to be part of this community. I hope you are reading a good book right now. Let me know what it is in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.